The process and where there's questions, specific ones.
Welcome back. I'm here at the iconic Melbourne GPO to talk about a famous land tax case between the owners, ISPT Pty Ltd, and the City of Melbourne and the Valuer General. The case being that the site was valued by the municipality for approximately $26 million and with a land tax bill of around $650,000. The owners contested both the site value and the land tax bill, and VCAT found in favour of the vendor, and the site value was determined to be $1 with $0 for land tax. So this was a successful contestment of the site value by the vendor, and I just want to talk a little bit about what led to this. And it's part of the Heritage Trust, and you can see the architecture is just magnificent. So obviously anyone wanting to construct behind this facade, there would be so many impediments in terms of crane access, etc. So you can see that the City of Melbourne and the Valuer General would have had a fairly difficult time in being able to prove that this building could be developed cheaply, if you like, whilst maintaining the exterior walls. This famous GPO Melbourne landmark was built in the 1860s as part of the Renaissance Revival era. So the history behind this case for the GPO behind me was that in 2019, ISPT were delivered a site valuation of $14.8 million from the City of Melbourne. And remember, what the City of Melbourne does is they conduct annual valuations on site value. Remember in one of my previous videos, I indicated that under the Valuation of Land Act, where a building is heritage listed or where there's been a demolition order that's been refused, then the valuers need to assume that the building stays. Otherwise, they assume that there's no building there and it's just a vacant site. So in this particular case, they came back with a notional site value of $14.8 million, assuming that the facade stays. The ISPT objected to the valuation, and it subsequently came back from the Valuer General's office at $26.375 million with a land tax bill of $650,000. So quite significant increase. And when that happened, then ISPT then objected to that, and they went to VCAT. And VCAT wanted arguments for both sides, and the arguments were as follows. ISPT proposed that the value of the site was $1 as opposed to $26 million on the basis of the building's heritage status and the associated restrictions with the site that made it difficult for any builder to hypothetically build a development taking into consideration that the exterior facade needed to remain unaffected and undisturbed. In the end, VCAT found in favour of ISPT and they avoided the $650,000 in land tax. ISPT made a number of claims as follows. ISPT claimed that the building could not be demolished or sustainably altered, and therefore cannot be developed in a typical way as per normal buildings in the city. And therefore its highest and best use should not be a development, but it should be as its current use as a retail premises. That was the first claim. And that the development was not capable of occurring, it was just hypothetical. Secondly, ISPT claimed that the highest and best use of the site was its current use. No future development, just what it's used currently. And it also claimed that the site had no value because what was creating the economical value was the building. So the way the building looked is what was creating the economic value that brought in the rent. The actual underlying site added no value. So it claimed that the value of the buildings took up all the value, assuming that the highest and best use was the current use, the retail use. So by extension, the third thing was that the economic value of the property was the building, not the site, and by extension the site was worth nothing, and it was given a notional value of $1. Fourthly, and more importantly, there did not appear to be any market evidence of similar buildings that were developed in the marketplace. So that was it was pretty clear that because of due to lack of evidence, that was further proof that in fact these type of heritage listed buildings developers stayed away from, because it was not economically viable to develop such buildings. So that was further proof that the current use is the highest and best use, and therefore one cannot hypothetically assume multi-story buildings on this site just on the back of a matchbox. The valuer general, on the other hand, argued that the premium CBD location made the site very valuable, and that there were comparable CBD sales once those sales were adjusted for improvements. They also argued that the heritage constraints do not nullify the value of the land. In other words, the value doesn't diminish to zero. It does still retain the value, because what they've seen in the marketplace, that there are developments that can be reused by keeping the facade. So they claim that in fact the land does still retain value because of, by virtue of where it is. It's right in the middle of Melbourne, and it's right in the heart of Melbourne. So the economic value was actually based on the land more than the building. And thirdly, the valuer general took the view that in fact it was the site value that had retained the economical value, attracting commuters and tenants to the location, and it wasn't in fact the improvements evidenced by the fact that it's a fairly strong retail hub. So they took the view that the land component was the most important component of this site, not the building component. So in the end, VCAT sided with ISPT, accepting that the heritage constraints were real, and therefore that one needed to accept what was occurring in the marketplace, not on some theoretical assumption dreamt up by some academics or some valuers who had no evidence in the marketplace. I think the wording that they used was that the site value must reflect real world constraints, not just hypothetical development rights. So what does this mean for the future? Well, what it means is ISPT were lucky enough to have a significant reduction in their land tax year 2020, but since then they've obviously been paying a considerable amount of land tax, and the land tax has been determined based on the site value of the site based on its existing use. So in future, valuers will probably steer away from assuming that a site that has heritage listing or that has a demolition order that's been refused, they'll probably stay away from valuing that site as a development site based on its highest and best use, and they'll assume obviously that the highest and best use is the existing use, which is in this particular case the retail use or the economic value of the rent. So what they'll do here is they'll look at the economic value of the rent, they'll capitalize that, and they'll value the whole site, and then they'll deduct the depreciated value of the improvements to get to the site value, as opposed to assuming that the site value is just the site with an external facade that can be developed on the inside. And you can just have a look behind me. I mean, what are the chances of getting, cranes in there? Look, imagine the disruption to the local community and being able to build something. I mean, the cost would be so prohibitive in building something internally. It would just be crazy to even be able to assume what those costs may be. I'm pretty sure whatever the costs are, they're probably likely to blow out in the real world. So there you go. There's a little lesson. Now, this case was very, very popular. You can look it up and read about it. It's very, very important in terms of the Victorian landscape, in terms of land taxation in the Victorian landscape, and I think that's pretty fair. I mean, land tax in Victoria has become quite an impost for property owners, and I think there's already some sentiment that the way land tax is calculated and imposed on the public is very unfair, and this is a good example of the government requiring some checks and balances. Thank you.